The great hall of the Galactic Council fell silent as the final vote was cast. 12 ancient civilizations had spoken, and 11 had chosen the same path. Only the Kitharan representatives stood apart, their crystalline form glowing with what others might call regret. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the center of the chamber, her hands clasped behind her back. She had expected this moment for weeks, but the reality still hit her like a physical blow. Around her, the council members avoided her gaze. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed satisfied with their decision. "The vote is final," announced High Counselor Zeftak, his blue scales shimmering under the chamber's artificial lights. "Humanity will withdraw from all council space within 1 standard galactic year." Sarah nodded slowly. She had prepared for this day, but part of her had hoped it would never come. 50 years ago, humans had been welcomed into the galactic community with celebration. Now they were being cast out like criminals. The trouble had started 6 months earlier in the research labs on Luna Station. Dr. Marcus Webb and his team had been working on a simple problem: how to move cargo ships faster between Earth's colonies. The supply lines were stretched thin, and people on the outer worlds needed food and medicine. Marcus was not trying to revolutionize space travel. He just wanted to help farmers get their crops to market before they spoiled. But when his team tested their new quantum tunneling device, something incredible happened. The test probe did not just move faster than light. It seemed to step outside normal space entirely. The breakthrough was remarkable. Ships could travel thousands of light years in days instead of months. But the Council saw something else entirely. They saw a weapon. They saw humans once again pushing boundaries that other species respected. "Your kind moves too fast," Counselor Vexhai had warned Sarah during the private meetings before the vote. "In 50 years, you have advanced further than most species do in 500. This frightens them." Sarah understood their fear, even if she disagreed with it. Humans were different from the other Council species. They had evolved on Earth, a world that other aliens called a death planet. Everything on Earth seemed designed to kill its inhabitants. Storms that could flatten cities, predators with no natural enemies, diseases that jumped between species. Most alien worlds were gentler places. Their intelligent species had evolved slowly, carefully, with time to think about each step. Humans had learned to adapt quickly or die. This made them unpredictable to alien minds. The Zephyrian hegemony led the movement to expel humanity. They were an old race, proud of their careful traditions and slow, deliberate progress. To them, humans were like children playing with fire in a library full of ancient books. "We have built this civilization over millions of years," Zeftak had said during the debates. "We will not watch it burn because one species cannot control itself." The Crystalline Collective supported the Zephyrians. Their silicon-based minds thought in terms of geological time. Human innovation happened so fast it seemed chaotic to them. They preferred the steady, predictable growth they had always known. Other council members had their own reasons. The Trilaxian Commerce Guild worried that human efficiency would disrupt their carefully balanced trade networks. The Hegemony Traders Union feared that human creativity would make their traditional methods obsolete. Only the Catharan Symbiosis spoke for humanity. Their species was a partnership between 2 different life forms, so they understood the value of different perspectives, but they were just 1 vote among 12. Sarah had tried to explain that humans were not reckless. They tested their technologies carefully. They shared their discoveries freely. When other species had problems, humans worked to solve them. But the Council's mind was made up. The quantum tunneling incident was just the final excuse. The real problem was deeper. Humans asked too many questions. They changed too many things. They made other species uncomfortable with their endless energy and curiosity. "You have 1 year," Zeftak continued. "All human colonies, stations, and ships must withdraw beyond the outer rim. You may take your possessions and equipment, but all Council technologies must be returned." Sarah felt the weight of 60 billion human lives on her shoulders. Families who had built homes on distant worlds, scientists working on projects that could benefit everyone, children who had never seen Earth but called Council space their home. But she also felt something else, a quiet pride in her species. Humans had faced extinction before. They had survived ice ages, plagues, and wars. They would survive this too. "We understand your decision," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics. "We accept it without argument or appeal." Some council members looked surprised. They had expected protests, angry words, or threats. Instead, they got quiet dignity. "We will begin preparations immediately," Sarah continued. "Our colonies will be evacuated in an orderly fashion. All council property will be returned undamaged. We will cause no disruption to your trade routes or territories." She paused, looking around the chamber one last time. Her eyes met those of each council member in turn. Some looked away. Others met her gaze with varying degrees of discomfort or defiance. "But remember this," she said softly. "You are making this choice. We came to you in friendship. We shared our knowledge freely. We helped solve problems that had troubled your species for generations, and now you send us away because you fear what we might become." Vexhi's crystalline form pulsed with soft light. "Admiral Chen, this decision brings me no joy. Perhaps in time—" "Perhaps," Sarah interrupted gently. "But today, you have decided that humanity is too dangerous for your galaxy. We will respect that decision. We will go where we are not wanted." She turned to leave, then stopped. "One last thing. When we are gone, remember who we were. Remember that we tried to be good neighbors. And remember that you chose to send us away." The chamber remained silent as Sarah walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the vast space, each one marking the end of an era. At the doorway, she turned back one final time. "Goodbye, counselors. Perhaps we will meet again under better circumstances." As the doors closed behind her, Sarah felt a mix of sadness and determination. Humanity's time in the galactic community was ending, but their story was far from over. They would find a new home beyond the rim. They would build something new, and maybe, someday the council would realize what they had lost. In her quarters that night, Sarah began drafting the evacuation orders. 60 billion people would need to pack up their lives and leave the only galaxy they had ever known. It would be the largest movement of civilians in galactic history, but humans were good at impossible tasks. They would find a way. Outside her window, the stars looked different now. They were no longer friendly lights marking the boundaries of human space. They were distant points of light in a galaxy that no longer wanted them. But beyond those stars, past the outer rim, lay unknown space. New worlds to explore, new challenges to face, new possibilities to discover. Humanity was going into exile, but exile could become adventure if they chose to see it that way. Sarah smiled grimly and continued writing her orders. The council thought they were solving a problem by sending humanity away. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. The evacuation began 3 days after the council vote. Across human space, people received the same message from Admiral Chen. Pack only what you need. Prepare for a long journey, and trust that humanity would find a new home. Captain Elena Rodriguez watched from the bridge of the transport ship New Horizon as the last shuttle left Kepler Station. The massive orbital facility had been humanity's proudest achievement in council space, a research center where human and alien scientists worked together on projects that benefited everyone. Now it stood empty, its lights dimmed, waiting for new owners who might never come. "All personnel aboard." "Captain," reported Lieutenant Commander James Park. "Station systems are locked down and handed over to council authority." Elena nodded, trying to keep emotion out of her voice. "Set course for the assembly point at Wolf 359. Maximum safe speed." As New Horizon turned away from Kepler Station, Elena thought about the 12 years she had spent there. She had made friends among the alien researchers. She had learned about cultures that stretched back millions of years. She had been part of something bigger than humanity. All of that was ending. The evacuation was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 60 billion humans lived spread across 300 worlds and thousands of space stations. Moving them all would have been impossible for most species. But humans had a gift for solving impossible problems. Admiral Chen had divided human space into sectors, each with its own evacuation coordinator. Military ships worked alongside civilian vessels. Corporate cargo haulers carried families instead of trade goods. Even luxury cruise ships were pressed into service as temporary shelters. The logistics were staggering. Every person needed food, water, and air for a journey that might last months. Medical supplies had to be distributed. Personal belongings had to be prioritized. What do you take when you can only carry 20 kilograms? But humans adapted. They always did. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in his empty laboratory on Luna Station, looking at the quantum tunneling device that had started everything. The machine was barely 2 meters tall, covered in cables and monitoring equipment. It looked harmless enough. "Funny how something so small can change everything," said Dr. Lisa Yamamoto, his research partner. Marcus touched the device's smooth metal surface. "The council thinks we created a weapon. But we were just trying to help people." "Maybe that's the problem," Lisa replied. "We help too much. We change too much. We make them nervous." The evacuation fleet grew larger each day as ships arrived at the assembly points. Earth's moon looked like a massive parking lot, with vessels of every size and description holding position while waiting for the final departure order. Among the evacuees, reactions varied. Some were angry at the council's decision, others were sad to leave their homes, but many were excited about the possibilities ahead. Humans had always been explorers at heart. Captain Amy Foster commanded the colony ship Pioneer Dream, carrying 10,000 settlers from the agricultural world of harvest. Her passengers had lost their farms, their homes, everything they had built over 2 generations. But she was amazed by their spirit. "We'll build new farms," said Thomas Chen, an elderly farmer who had grown crops to feed 3 systems. "Better farms. We know things now that we didn't know when we started." His granddaughter Sarah, named after the admiral, bounced excitedly in her seat. "Will there be new animals? New plants? Can I name them?" Amy smiled. "I think there will be lots of new things to discover." The evacuation was not just about moving people. Human scientists worked frantically to copy every bit of research, every technological advancement, every piece of knowledge they had accumulated during their 50 years in council space. They could not take council technology with them, but they could take what they had learned. Dr. Yamamoto led teams that packed research data into portable quantum storage units. Decades of scientific collaboration with alien species was compressed into devices no larger than books. Medical knowledge, engineering specifications, cultural studies, everything that made humanity's civilization was carefully preserved. "We're not just evacuating people," she told her teams. "We're preserving human knowledge for whatever comes next." The council watched the evacuation with mixed feelings. Some members were relieved to see the troublesome humans leaving. Others began to have doubts as they saw the massive scale of the operation. The Trilaxian Commerce Guild realized they were losing their most efficient trading partners. Human freight companies had revolutionized cargo transport with their innovative scheduling systems and route optimization. Without them, shipping costs across the galaxy would increase significantly. The Zephyrian military studied the evacuation with professional admiration. Moving 60 billion people without major incident required planning skills that impressed even their disciplined minds. They had expected chaos, riots, perhaps even human attacks on council facilities. Instead, they saw the largest logistical operation in galactic history executed with precision that put their own military to shame. Councillor Vexhai of the Catherine Symbiosis felt growing regret as reports reached the council chambers. "We are making a mistake," they told their fellow council members. "Look at what they accomplish even under pressure. Imagine what they could do as true partners." But High Councillor Zeftak remained firm. "They are dangerous precisely because they are so capable. Better to lose their benefits than risk their chaos." The evacuation continued for 11 months. Ship after ship left council space, carrying humanity toward the unknown regions beyond the outer rim. Long-range sensors tracked the massive fleet as it moved farther and farther from civilized space. Admiral Chen traveled aboard the flagship Endurance, coordinating the exodus from her mobile command center. She barely slept during those months, monitoring the movement of thousands of ships and millions of people. But she felt pride in what humanity was accomplishing. They were not fleeing in terror or anger. They were conducting an orderly withdrawal with dignity intact. Every facility they abandoned was left clean and undamaged. Every piece of council property was returned in perfect condition. They proved that humans could be trusted even when being rejected. The last human ship left council space on schedule, exactly 1 year after the vote. The Endurance crossed the outer rim boundary at exactly midnight, Council Standard Time. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge, watching the navigation display as the marker changed from council space to unknown territory. Behind them lay the galaxy they had called home for 50 years. Ahead lay empty space that no council ship had ever explored. The nearest known star was 3 months away at maximum speed. Beyond that, nobody knew what they would find. All ships reporting successful transition beyond the rim, Admiral, reported her communications officer. Fleet status is green across all groups. Chen nodded. Signal the fleet. Set course for system designation Alpha 1. It's time to find out what's waiting for us out here. As the evacuation fleet disappeared into the darkness beyond the galactic rim, Council space seemed strangely quiet. Trade routes that had bustled with human ships now carried only traditional cargo vessels. Research stations that had thrived with human innovation returned to their steady, predictable pace. The Catheran symbiosis monitored the long-range sensors until the last human ship disappeared from detection. Counselor Vexhi filed a final report. Human evacuation complete. No incidents. All obligations fulfilled. Galaxy is now free of human influence. But as Vexhi submitted the report, they could not shake the feeling that the galaxy had just become a poorer place. Time would tell if the Council had made the right choice. In the darkness beyond the rim, 60 billion humans traveled toward an uncertain future. They carried with them everything that made them human: their curiosity, their adaptability, their determination to survive and thrive wherever they found themselves. The Council had tried to solve the problem of humanity by sending them away. But problems like energy could not be destroyed. They could only change form. Humanity was about to change form in ways the Council could never imagine. 25 years had passed since the last human ship disappeared beyond the outer rim. In the Council chambers, dust motes danced in shafts of artificial sunlight that illuminated empty seats where human representatives had once sat. The galaxy had moved on, or so the Council members told themselves. High Counselor Zeftak reviewed the quarterly trade reports with growing frustration. For the third year in a row, economic growth had stagnated across Council space. Shipping delays were becoming more common. Several trade disputes had escalated into economic warfare between member species. The Trilaxian Commerce Guild is demanding exclusive rights to the Antari shipping routes, reported his aide. The Hegemony Traders Union threatens to blockade Trilaxian ports if they don't get equal access. Zeftak's scales darkened with annoyance. Have they tried negotiation? Both sides refuse to compromise. Each claims the other is being unreasonable. Such disputes had been common before humanity joined the Council. But during the 50 years of human membership, these conflicts had been rare. Human mediators had possessed an unusual talent for finding solutions that satisfied everyone. They called it thinking outside the box, though no Council translator had ever successfully explained what boxes had to do with problem solving. The loss of human innovation was felt in other ways too. Scientific research had slowed dramatically across the galaxy. The major breakthroughs of the past quarter century could be counted on one hand. Compared to the flood of discoveries during the human era, Dr. Kethvar of the Crystalline Collective stared at the research proposal on her desk. Her team wanted to study quantum crystallization effects, a project that would take an estimated 400 years to complete. Before the humans left, such research moved much faster. Human scientists had an annoying habit of trying dozens of approaches simultaneously, finding shortcuts that more careful species missed. She missed those annoying habits more than she cared to admit. But the real crisis began 3 months ago, when long-range sensors detected something new approaching from the galactic south. The discovery fell to Captain Yexitai of the Zephyrian Deep Space Monitoring Service, a routine posting that usually involved watching empty space for decades at a time. Contact bearing 075 Mark 44, reported his sensor operator. Multiple signatures, biological configuration heading directly for Council space. Captain Yexitai studied the readings with growing alarm. The approaching objects were clearly artificial, but unlike any technology in Council databases, they seemed to be grown rather than built, with organic curves and flowing lines that suggested living tissue. Send a standard greeting transmission, Yexitai ordered. All languages, all frequencies. The response came immediately, not in words, but in actions. The approaching ships suddenly accelerated, their course adjusting to intercept the monitoring station. Their speed was impossible by Council physics. Nothing that large should be able to move that fast. Contact in 6 hours, the sensor operator reported. Sir, they're not slowing down. The Battle of Outpost 7 lasted exactly 17 minutes. The organic ships swarmed the monitoring station like insects attacking a flower. Council defense systems that had protected the galaxy for millennia proved utterly useless. Energy weapons had no effect on the bioships. They seemed to absorb the energy and use it to grow stronger. Kinetic projectiles were intercepted by organic matter that reformed faster than it could be destroyed. The station's desperate transmissions were cut off mid-sentence. When Council reinforcements arrived 3 days later, they found nothing but debris and a strange biological residue that pulsed with its own light. Analysis of the residue revealed something that chilled every Council scientist who studied it. The material was still alive, still evolving, still adapting to the weapons that had been used against it. The enemy had a name: the Keth Swarm. Intelligence reports painted a terrifying picture of a hive-minded species that treated warfare as biological evolution. Every battle taught them new defenses. Every weapon used against them became useless for future encounters. Admiral Vorthak of the Zephyrian Navy studied the tactical reports from the Keth front with growing despair. In 3 months, the swarm had consumed 5-star systems. Their bioships multiplied with each victory, converting captured resources into new vessels that were stronger and smarter than their predecessors. "They're learning from every engagement," reported his tactical officer. Energy weapons triggered the development of absorption capabilities. Kinetic attacks led to adaptive armor. Chemical weapons resulted in immunity filters. "What about our alliance fleets?" Vorthak asked. The Trilaxian Third Fleet was destroyed at Sigma Draconis. The Crystalline Defense Corps managed to slow them down at Kepler 442, but lost 80% of their ships. The hegemony is withdrawing their forces to defend their core worlds. Traditional Council military doctrine relied on technological superiority. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, their defenses stronger than anything previous enemies could field. But the Keth turned that advantage into a weakness by adapting to each technological edge. The swarm's bioships seemed alive in every sense. They repaired damage mid-battle. They shared information instantaneously across vast distances. They evolved new capabilities in real time based on battlefield conditions. Fighting them was like fighting an immune system that learned from every infection. Counselor Vexhai of the Catherian Symbiosis watched the tactical displays in the emergency session with growing dread. Red markers showed Keth positions advancing deeper into Council space. Blue markers representing Council fleets were disappearing with alarming frequency. Current projections show total Council defeat within 18 months, reported the military analysts. The Keth advance cannot be stopped using conventional tactics. High Counselor Zeftak's scales had turned almost black with stress. "What alternatives do we have?" "Evacuation of core worlds, abandon the outer territories and establish defensive positions around our most important systems." "Running away," Zeftak said bitterly. "The greatest civilization in galactic history, reduced to running away from biological parasites." That was when Vexhai spoke the words that others were thinking, but afraid to say. "We need different tactics. We need unpredictable strategies. We need—" They paused, their crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. "We need the humans." The chamber fell silent. For 25 years, humanity had been the species that must not be named. The dangerous children who had been sent away for the galaxy's own good. But now, facing extinction, even dangerous children seem preferable to certain death. "The humans are gone," Zeftak said finally. "We have no idea where they went or if they even survived. The space beyond the rim is uncharted. They could be anywhere. Or they could be dead," added the Trilaxian representative. 60 billion people trying to survive in unknown space with limited resources. The odds were never favorable. But Vexhai had been thinking about this possibility for weeks. The humans were always good at beating impossible odds, and if they survived, they let the thought hang in the air. If humanity had survived 25 years in the unknown regions beyond the rim, what had they become? What had they built? What had they learned? The same adaptability and innovation that had frightened the Council might be exactly what was needed to fight an enemy that evolved. The Keth swarm continued its advance while the Council debated. More systems fell. More fleets were destroyed. The bioships grew larger and more sophisticated with each victory. Time was running out. Finally, Zeftak made the decision that pride and fear had prevented for too long. "Send scout ships beyond the rim," he ordered. "Find the humans. Find out if they're alive, if they're willing to help, and what price they'll demand for their assistance. And if they refuse, asked the Trilaxian representative. Zeftak looked at the tactical display showing red markers advancing toward the heart of Council space. Then we face extinction with the knowledge that we chose pride over survival. The scout ships launched within a week, heading into the darkness beyond the outer rim. They carried long-range sensors, diplomatic credentials, and the hopes of 12 civilizations that had spent 25 years trying to forget about the species they had exiled. Behind them, the Keth swarm continued its relentless advance, consuming everything in its path and growing stronger with each victory. The galaxy's greatest civilization faced its darkest hour, and somewhere in the unknown darkness beyond the rim, humanity waited to see if their former neighbors would come calling. Captain Silith of the Zephyrian Scout Service had volunteered for dangerous missions before, but nothing compared to this. Her ship, the Deep Explorer, was crossing into territory that no Council vessel had ever mapped. The space beyond the outer rim was vast, dark, and completely unknown. Any signs of human activity? She asked her sensor operator for the 100th time that day. Negative, Captain. We're still detecting background radiation from some old quantum signatures, but nothing recent. If humans passed through this region, it was years ago. Silith studied the star charts that showed nothing but empty space and question marks. Intelligence estimates suggested that humanity's evacuation fleet had headed toward a cluster of G-type stars about 6 months' travel from the rim, but 6 months could become 6 years if they had continued moving. The Deep Explorer was one of 5 scout ships searching different sectors beyond the rim. So far, none had found any trace of human civilization. Some council members were beginning to think that humanity had simply died out in the harsh conditions of unexplored space. Silith refused to believe that. Humans were survivors. They had colonized death worlds that other species considered uninhabitable. They had thrived in environments that should have killed them. If anyone could survive in the galactic wilderness, it would be humans. On the 12th day of their search, the sensors detected something impossible. Captain, I'm reading artificial gravity signatures, reported the sensor operator. Multiple sources, very large, bearing 030 Mark 77. How large? Silith asked. I'm not sure, Captain. The readings are strange. It looks like there's an entire system here, but it's not showing up on visual sensors. Silith ordered a careful approach. What they found changed everything. The system contained 3 planets orbiting a yellow star, but that was where normal description ended. The worlds were obviously artificial, perfectly spherical, with orbital rings that sparkled with their own light. Space around the planet swarmed with activity that defied immediate classification. Are those ships? Asked the navigation officer, pointing at objects that moved between the artificial worlds. I think they're cities, Silith replied, studying the sensor readings. Flying cities. The objects were massive habitat structures that moved freely through space, each one large enough to house millions of inhabitants. They seemed to be built from materials that bent light around them, making them nearly invisible except for their gravity signatures. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. Captain, we're being scanned, reported the sensor operator. The scan signature is human. Before Silith could respond, her communications console lit up with an incoming transmission. The voice that came through the speakers spoke perfect Zephyrian, but with an accent that marked the speaker as definitely human. Council Vessel Deep Explorer, this is traffic control for the Terra Nova system. Please state your business and follow the navigation beacon to Quarantine Station Alpha 7. Silith stared at her communications officer in amazement. Traffic control? She finally managed to say, confirmed, Captain. You are in human territory and subject to Confederation immigration law. Will you comply with standard quarantine procedures? The quarantine station turned out to be larger than many Council space stations. As the Deep Explorer docked, Silith could see through the viewports that the facility bustled with activity. Humans in advanced environmental suits moved cargo containers that seemed to float without anti-grav units. Children played in observation lounges under artificial gravity that felt more natural than anything Council technology produced. Ambassador Jonathan Torres met them at the airlock. He was tall and dark-skinned, with gray hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to dealing with complex negotiations. Behind him stood a small group of humans who represented what they called the Colonial Confederation. Captain Sileth, Torres said with a slight smile. It's been a long time since we've seen a council ship out here. 25 years, in fact. Sileth tried to maintain her diplomatic composure, but the questions were overwhelming. Mr. Ambassador, the council, we didn't know that humanity had established such extensive colonies. 637 worlds now, Torres replied casually, plus about 2,000 mobile habitats and 1,500 research stations. We've been busy. The numbers were staggering. When humanity left council space, they had controlled 300 worlds. In 25 years, they had more than doubled their territory in completely unknown regions of space. How? Sileth asked. Torres gestured toward the viewports where the artificial worlds of Terra Nova hung in space like jewels. Necessity, creativity, and the simple fact that humans don't like being told what they can't do. He led them through the station's corridors, past laboratories that seemed to blend biological and mechanical systems in ways that made no scientific sense. Plants grew integrated with electronic circuits. Crystal formations processed data, while living organisms manufactured materials that looked like they belonged in a fantasy story. We learned a lot during our exile, Torres explained. Cut off from council technology, we had to develop everything ourselves. It forced us to think differently about the relationship between living systems and mechanical ones. In the main conference room, Torres activated a holographic display that showed the human territories beyond the rim. Sileth gasped at the scope of what she saw. Humanity had colonized an entire spiral arm of the galaxy, establishing trade routes and defensive networks that connected hundreds of star systems. We call it the Confederation now, Torres said. Each world governs itself, but we cooperate on defense, research, and major construction projects. It's more flexible than the old colonial system. This is remarkable, Sileth said, but why haven't you contacted the council? Surely there could be trade, diplomatic relations. Torres's expression grew cooler. 25 years ago, the council decided we were too dangerous for civilized space. You told us to leave and never come back, so we built our own civilization. But surely, Captain, Torres interrupted gently. Why are you here? The council spent decades trying to forget we existed. Something must have changed for you to send scout ships into human territory. Sileth took a deep breath. She had prepared for this moment, but actually saying the words was harder than she had expected. The council needs your help, she said simply. Torres raised an eyebrow. With what? The Keth swarm. They're destroying everything. Our fleets can't stop them. They adapt to every weapon we use. They learn from every battle. At our current rate of losses, council civilization will be extinct within a year. Torres was quiet for a long moment. Around the table, the other human representatives exchanged glances that conveyed volumes of unspoken communication. The Keth, Torres said finally. Bioadaptive hive mind? Ships that evolve in real time? Converts conquered populations into biomass? Sileth stared at him. You know about them? We've been fighting them for 8 years, Torres replied matter-of-factly. They showed up on our outer territories about 3 years after they first appeared in council space. We've managed to hold them off, but it's been challenging. You've been fighting the Keth for 8 years? Sileth couldn't hide her amazement. How? Torres smiled grimly. The same way humans have always fought impossible enemies. We adapt faster than they do. We think of strategies they can't predict. We use weapons that don't follow the rules. He activated another holographic display showing battle reports from the human-Keth conflict. Ship designs that seemed to combine organic and mechanical elements. Weapons that used principles Sileth didn't recognize. Tactics that made no sense by traditional military doctrine, but somehow achieved victory. The council wanted predictable allies. Torres continued. Species that would follow established patterns and respect traditional boundaries. But the Keth are not a traditional enemy. Fighting them requires the kind of chaotic, adaptive thinking that made you uncomfortable with us in the first place. Sileth felt a growing sense of both hope and shame. Hope because humanity clearly had the capability to fight the Keth effectively. Shame because the council had exiled the very people who could have prevented the crisis. The council is prepared to offer full restoration of membership, she said. Complete voting rights, territorial concessions, technology sharing agreements. Torres held up a hand to stop her. Captain, you're assuming we want to come back. 25 years ago, you kicked us out of your galaxy. We've built something better out here. Why would we want to return to a place where we're not welcome? Because people are dying, Silith said quietly. Billions of innocent beings who had nothing to do with the decision to exile humanity. Entire species facing extinction because the Council was too proud to admit we needed your help. Torres studied her for a long moment. I appreciate your honesty, Captain. But this isn't my decision to make. The Confederation Council will need to debate this request. That could take weeks. We don't have weeks, Silith said urgently. The Keth advance accelerates with every victory. Each day of delay costs more lives. Then perhaps, Torres said slowly, the Council should have thought of that 25 years ago. But even as he spoke, Silith could see something in his eyes. Humans might be angry about their exile, but they were not cruel. The same compass the Confederation Council met in emergency session aboard the massive habitat station New Geneva, which drifted in the outer reaches of the Terra Nova system. Representatives from 600 human worlds gathered in a chamber that could have housed a small city, their faces displayed on holographic screens that created a sphere of light around the central speaking platform. Ambassador Jonathan Torres stood at the center, presenting Captain Sileth's request to the assembled delegates. The debate had been going for 6 hours, and opinions remained sharply divided. They exiled us, said Councilor Maria Santos from New Brazil. 60 billion people forced to abandon everything they had built. Now they come crawling back because they need our help? Why should we risk human lives for people who considered us too dangerous to exist? Because it's the right thing to do, replied Councilor David Kim from Terra Alpha. The Council made a mistake, but letting entire species go extinct won't fix that mistake. It will just make us as closed-minded as they were. Admiral Sarah Chen, now 75 but still sharp as a laser, listened to the arguments from her position as military coordinator. She had led the evacuation 25 years ago, and her opinion carried enormous weight in human space. The question isn't whether the Council wronged us, she said finally. The question is what kind of civilization we want to be. Do we help those in need? Or do we let old grudges determine our actions? The debate continued through the night. Some delegates wanted complete isolation from Council affairs. Others pushed for military intervention. A few suggested offering refugee assistance to Council species while letting the governments fall. But it was Dr. Marcus Webb, now Director of Confederation Research, who provided the decisive argument. The man whose quantum tunneling research had triggered humanity's exile took the speaking platform with data that changed everything. The Keth aren't just a threat to the Council, he announced. Our long-range surveys show swarm scouts probing human territory from multiple directions. They're mapping our defenses, studying our capabilities. Whether we help the Council or not, we're going to face a full Keth invasion within 2 years. The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed this information. Fighting them in Council space, with Council allies, gives us better odds than facing them alone on our borders, Webb continued. This isn't about helping our former neighbors. This is about survival. The vote was close, 312 in favor, 288 against. But humanity would answer the Council's call for help. However, they would do it on their own terms. Torres returned to the quarantine station where Captain Silith waited with barely contained anxiety. The Keth had taken 3 more systems while the Confederation debated, and Council resistance was collapsing faster each day. We'll help, Torres announced without preamble. But we have conditions. Silith nodded eagerly. Name them. First, this is a mutual defense alliance, not a rescue mission. Human forces will have equal command authority with Council military leaders. Second, all territorial claims in the regions we defend become Joint Council Confederation space. Third, full diplomatic recognition of human sovereignty over our current territories. And fourth, Torres continued, his voice growing harder, the Council formally acknowledges that the exile was a mistake. Not a regrettable necessity or a difficult decision. A mistake. Silith winced. Getting the Council to admit error would be almost as difficult as fighting the Keth. But with extinction looming, pride had become a luxury they couldn't afford. I'll transmit your terms immediately, she said. The Council response came within hours. Complete acceptance of all human conditions. Desperation had a way of clarifying priorities. Admiral Sarah Chen arrived at the Council's Emergency Command Center aboard the battle station New Earth, a vessel that demonstrated how much human technology had evolved during their exile. The ship was half the size of a traditional Council dreadnought but generated 3 times the power output through systems that seemed to blur the line between biological and mechanical engineering. High Counselor Zeftak met her at the docking bay, his blue scales pale with stress and exhaustion. Admiral Chen, thank you for coming. We owe you an apology. Save the apologies for after we win, Chen replied curtly. Show me the tactical situation. The Council war room painted a grim picture. Red markers indicating Keth positions covered nearly a quarter of the galaxy. Council fleets, represented by blue markers, had been pushed back to defensive positions around their core worlds. At their current rate of advance, the Keth would reach the Council capital within 6 months. What's your assessment? Asked Admiral Vorthak of the Zephyrian Navy. Chen studied the displays for several minutes, her experienced eye analyzing patterns and possibilities. You're fighting them like a traditional enemy. Concentrated fleets, direct engagement, trying to match their technology with yours. That's exactly what they want. What do you suggest? Vorthak asked. We stop trying to out-evolve them, Chen replied. Instead, we make evolution irrelevant. The strategy that emerged from human council planning sessions was unlike anything in traditional military doctrine. Instead of large fleet engagements, they would use small, fast units that could strike and withdraw before the Keth could adapt. Instead of standardized weapons, they would employ technologies so diverse that adaptation to one would be useless against another. The first test came at the Battle of Nexus Prime, where a major Keth fleet was advancing toward the Council's primary shipyards. Rather than meet them with massed firepower, the combined fleet deployed in scattered formations that seemed chaotic to traditional military thinking. Commander Elena Rodriguez, now captain of the heavy cruiser Defiant, led a strike group of human and Trilaxian ships against the Keth left flank. Her vessels used weapons that the galaxy had never seen before, viral programs that infected bioships with contradictory growth instructions, quantum disruptors that prevented cellular regeneration, and most surprisingly, music? Asked her Trilaxian tactical officer. The Keth communicate through biological resonance, Elena explained as her weapons officer broadcast complex harmonics toward the enemy fleet. Disrupt their frequency coordination and their hive mind starts making mistakes. The effect was immediate and devastating. Keth bioships began attacking each other as contradictory signals overwhelmed their communication networks. Ships that had seemed invincible suddenly became confused, vulnerable targets. Meanwhile, on the right flank, Zephyrian and crystalline forces employed weapons designed by human engineers but built with alien technology. Crystalline ships fired resonance weapons that shattered biohulls along natural fault lines. Zephyrian vessels used thermal mines that created localized supernovas, sterilizing space and expanding spheres of destruction. But the most effective tactic was psychological warfare directed at a hive mind. Human psychologists had developed techniques that exploited the Keth's collective consciousness, broadcasting images and concepts that created feedback loops in their shared awareness. Dr. Lisa Yamamoto, now the Confederation's chief xenopsychologist, coordinated the mental assault from her position aboard a specially modified communication ship. Imagine trying to think while 10,000 voices in your head argue about different memories of the same event, she explained to her confused alien colleagues. The Battle of Nexus Prime lasted 18 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Keth fleet. For the first time since the invasion began, bioships retreated rather than adapt and continue fighting. But more importantly, the victory demonstrated something that neither side had expected. Humans and aliens working together were more effective than either group alone. Human creativity combined with alien technical expertise produced solutions that neither could achieve independently. The war continued for 2 more years, but the momentum had shifted. Human tactics prevented the Keth from adapting to any single strategy. Alien technology provided the raw power to implement human innovations. Mixed crews on every ship created an atmosphere of cooperation that spread throughout both civilizations. The final battle took place at the edge of Keth space, where Admiral Chen led a combined fleet of 700 ships representing every species in the galaxy. The Keth had gathered their remaining forces for one last assault, but they faced an enemy they could no longer understand or counter. "All ships, execute Pattern Omega," Chen commanded. What followed was not a battle but an orchestrated performance. Ships moved in formations that seemed to dance around Keth positions. Weapons fired in sequences that created interference patterns the bioships couldn't analyze. Even the Keth's adaptation abilities became a weakness as conflicting evolutionary pressures tore their fleet apart from within. When the last Keth bioship was destroyed, the galaxy fell silent. The war was over. 5 years later, the galaxy was transformed. The council chambers had been expanded to include permanent human representation. Joint research stations studied technologies that neither species could have developed alone. Cultural exchange programs prevented the misunderstandings that had led to humanity's exile. But perhaps the most important change was philosophical. The galaxy had learned that diversity of thought and approach was not a threat to be managed.